Jake loved the quiet. After years of the city's noise and endless neighborly conflicts, he had finally found his sanctuary, a modest farm just outside the suburban sprawl. Far enough to breathe but close enough to still feel connected. The red barn creaked gently in the late afternoon breeze, and the rows of corn swayed lazily under a sky streaked with gold. He had left behind HOA meetings and their endless rules, the endless red tape that governed what color you could paint your mailbox or how tall your hedges could grow. Out here, Jake was free, or so he thought. That afternoon, while tending to his vegetable patch, Jake noticed something unusual. His prize-winning tomatoes, usually protected by a low wire fence, were trampled. The soil was churned up, as if something large had passed through. His heart sank, not because of the damage, but because he hadn't heard a sound. No footsteps, no rustling leaves, just the broken plants lying in eerie silence. Jake crouched down and examined the ground carefully. Footprints, large, heavy, boots, but oddly spaced, almost like the person was trying to be quiet. What disturbed him most was how the footprints stopped abruptly near the edge of his property, where his security cameras were mounted. There was no sign of the intruder on any recorded footage. It was as if whoever had been here knew exactly where to step to avoid detection. A cold shiver ran down Jake's spine. He stood, looking out over the fields. The farm was supposed to be his refuge, his fortress against the chaos of the world. Now it felt vulnerable, exposed. Who could be sneaking around his land? And more importantly, why? The next morning, Jake went into town for supplies, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the footprints. At the local cafe, a whisper of a name caught his ear. Karen. The name hit him like a splash of cold water. Karen, the HOA enforcer, the neighborhood watchdog, with a reputation for crossing every line to enforce rules that sometimes didn't even exist. She was infamous for knocking on doors at dawn, to lecture about lawn ornaments, for calling city inspectors over trivial paint colors. To most, she was just a nuisance. But to Jake, she was a warning sign. Could it be her? Was she really the one sneaking onto his farm? Jake didn't want to believe it. His property technically lay outside the HOA's jurisdiction, but Karen had a way of stretching rules to suit her purposes. The thought that she might be coming onto his land was unsettling. Back on his farm, Jake checked his cameras again, this time more carefully. He reviewed the footage frame by frame, but found nothing. It was as if his farm was being watched by someone who knew all his moves, someone who was always one step ahead. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Jake noticed a shadow moving just beyond the tree line. At first, he thought it was an animal, but then the figure stepped into the fading light, tall, sharp-featured, and unmistakably confident. Karen. She stood at the edge of his property, arms crossed, eyes scanning his farm with a mixture of disdain and determination. Jake's blood ran cold. This wasn't a casual trespasser. This was deliberate. Karen's gaze locked onto Jake, and for a moment, neither moved. The silence was thick, heavy with unspoken threats. Jake's mind raced. Why was she here? What did she want? Before he could react, Karen turned sharply and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Jake alone with more questions than answers. As night fell, Jake paced by the porch light, feeling the weight of what was to come. He wasn't just defending crops anymore. This was about something deeper. Territory, control, and maybe even secrets buried beneath his farm. And Jake knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let Karen, or anyone, invade his sanctuary. Without a fight, Jake couldn't shake the image of Karen, standing at the edge of his property. The way she looked at his farm, like it was some kind of personal battleground, sent a cold thrill through him. It wasn't just about the property. Lines, something about her presence felt charged, like a storm gathering on the horizon. The next morning, Jake made his rounds early, checking fences and locks with a new urgency. His old dog, Max, lumbered beside him, nose to the ground, ears perked. Max was a hulking mastiff mix, loyal and alert, but usually calm and slow-moving. Today, though, there was a tension in Max's stance that Jake hadn't seen before. The dog's instincts, honed over years of guarding the farm, were telling him something was wrong. As Jake inspected the south fence, where the footprints had appeared, he noticed fresh marks in the dirt. This time, the prints were clearer. Heavy work boots, distinct tread, moving deliberately toward the barn. Jake's jaw tightened. Whoever had been here wasn't just wandering, they were searching. Hours later, Jake was fixing a broken gate hinge when a sharp knock startled him. He turned to see a woman in a crisp blazer, sunglasses perched on her head despite the overcast sky. It was Karen, the same woman from the night before, now standing firmly on his porch. "I need to talk," she said, her tone brisk but not unkind. Jake wiped his hands on his jeans, sizing her up. "You've been on my land before. What's this about?" Karen didn't flinch. "You're in violation of the HOA's appearance guidelines. That windmill of yours is an eyesore, and frankly, it's hurting property values in the neighborhood." Jake laughed, short and sharp. "My farm isn't part of your HOA. Your rules don't apply here." Karen's eyes narrowed. "That's where you're wrong. The HOA boundaries are flexible, and we've been tasked with ensuring a consistent look and feel in this entire area. Your property may be just outside the lines, but we have jurisdiction when aesthetics are involved." Jake's patience thinned. "Jurisdiction or not, this is my land. I built that windmill with my own hands. You can't just stroll in here and make demands." Karen's expression hardened. "I'm here to give you an ultimatum. Remove the windmill, or we'll take legal action. You'll be fined, and if you resist, we can escalate this to a court." "Order!" Jake's blood boiled. "You can try, but I'm not backing down." Karen smiled thinly. "You should reconsider. People don't like to mess with the HOA." With that, she turned and left, her heels clicking sharply on the wooden porch. Jake watched her go, a storm of anger and confusion swirling inside him. What was this obsession with the windmill? Why was Karen so determined to push him out or force him to comply? The questions gnawed at him, refusing to be ignored. That night, Jake sat by the porch light, Max at his side. The old dog growled low as a figure moved just beyond the fence line, too dark and silent to see clearly. Jake reached for his phone and called his lawyer friend, Mark. "Karen's gone too far this time," Jake said, voice low. "She's crossing lines, making threats. I want to know what my rights are and what I can do to protect this place." Mark's voice was calm but serious. "You're in a tricky spot, Jake. HOAs have power, but they can't just trespass or enforce rules outside their territory. Document everything. Cameras, logs, anything. And be ready. People like Karen don't back down easily." Jake hung up, heart pounding. He glanced at Max, whose eyes gleamed with fierce loyalty. Tonight, Jake realized, this was no longer just about a farm or a windmill. It was about standing his ground against an overreach that threatened everything he'd built. He locked the door, double-checked the cameras, and settled in, waiting. Because he knew Karen wasn't finished, and neither was Max. The sun hadn't even risen when Jake's phone buzzed sharply beside his bed. Groggy, he rubbed his eyes and glanced at the screen. A message from an unknown number. "Remove the windmill by Friday, or face the consequences." Jake's stomach tightened. It wasn't just Karen anymore. Someone was playing hardball, and the tone was unmistakably threatening. He sat up and rubbed his face, trying to shake off the dread creeping up his spine. Later that morning, Jake found Karen waiting at the edge of his driveway. Her arms were crossed, her usual smug smile replaced with a look of icy determination. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Jake," she said, voice clipped, "consider this your final warning. Remove that windmill by the end of the week. If not, the HOA will escalate the matter. Fines, legal fees, and possibly a restraining order." Jake met her gaze, refusing to flinch. "You're trespassing, Karen. This is my property, outside. Your HOA. You don't have the right." Karen took a step closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. I'm not just an HOA enforcer. I'm the one who makes sure the neighborhood stays perfect. And if you don't comply, I'll make your life a nightmare." Jake felt the weight of those words settle in his chest. This wasn't just a dispute over aesthetics anymore. It was a power play. "Go ahead," Jake said quietly. "Try your worst. I'm not afraid of you or your threats." Karen's eyes flickered with something cold. Anger or calculation, Jake couldn't tell. "You should be." She turned and stalked off, leaving Jake alone on the gravel road. That afternoon, Jake reviewed his security footage again. He spotted something new, a figure lurking near the barn, snapping pictures of his property. The shadow moved with purpose, but the camera angle was too dark to identify them. Jake's blood ran cold. Was Karen the one sending those threats? Or someone else? He decided to talk to his neighbor, Sarah, who lived closer to the HOA neighborhood line. Sarah was a sharp woman, well-connected, and known for her no-nonsense attitude. When Jake explained what was happening, Sarah's expression darkened. "Karen's been pushing hard lately. Heard she's on some crusade to clean up the area. Maybe to increase property values or something. But she's dangerous. People have tried to stand up to her before. She's ruthless." Jake nodded grimly. "I'm ready to fight, but I need to protect my home." That night, Jake began preparing. He tightened the locks, double-checked the cameras, and brought Max inside the house. Max's deep growl echoed down the hallway whenever Karen's name came up. The dog seemed to sense the threat before Jake even fully understood it. Jake also dug out an old toolbox and began reinforcing the fence, making it harder for anyone to sneak in. But he knew it wasn't just about physical barriers anymore. The farm had become a battlefield, and Karen was leading the charge. As the deadline loomed, Jake stayed vigilant. Every rustle in the night made his heart race. Max patrolled the property, with relentless focus, his low growls warning off unseen threats. Then, on the fourth night, the quiet shattered. Jake was awoken by the sharp bark of Max. Through the window, he saw a figure moving stealthily near the windmill. It was Karen, bold, reckless, and completely ignoring the risk. Max charged outside, barking fiercely. Karen froze, caught between escape and confrontation. "Get back!" Jake shouted, throwing open the door. Karen's eyes widened as Max advanced, his size and presence overwhelming. She stumbled back, tripping over loose dirt. Jake stepped forward, voice steady but firm. "You're trespassing. Leave now." Karen glared, breathing hard. "You think this ends tonight? It's just beginning." And with that, she fled into the darkness, leaving Jake standing beside his windmill, Max at his side, both ready for whatever came next. The moon hung low and pale over Jake's farm as he paced the creaky porch, replaying the confrontation with Karen again and again in his mind. Her defiant glare, the reckless way she'd trespassed under the cover of night. It wasn't just stubbornness. There was a dangerous fire behind her eyes, a hunger to push him out no matter what it took. Jake knew this wasn't just about a crooked windmill or HOA rules anymore. This was war. Inside the barn, Max stirred. The massive mastiff had been restless all night, growling softly at shadows and strange noises Jake couldn't hear. Max wasn't just a dog. He was the farm's silent sentinel, a beast bred and trained to protect. Jake grabbed his flashlight and walked toward the fence, inspecting every post, every wire, tightening what was loose. The boundary lines that once marked the peaceful edges of his world now felt like a battlefield's front lines. As Jake worked, his mind drifted back to the cryptic threats. Notes slipped under his door, anonymous calls, strange footprints. Whoever was behind this had done their homework. They knew how to pressure him without getting caught. They wanted him scared. They wanted him alone. But Jake wouldn't let that happen. He climbed into the loft of the barn, where a dusty old box sat. Inside were tools and equipment from his city days. A collection of security gadgets, alarms, and motion sensors he'd never thought he'd need on the farm. Tonight, they would come back to life. Carefully, Jake set up extra cameras at key points, hidden near the barn, the windmill, and along the southern fence. He connected sensors to his phone, so he could get alerts no matter where he was. Max followed quietly, eyes gleaming in the flashlight beam. Jake knelt down and rubbed the dog's broad head. "You ready for this, boy? We're not letting anyone mess with our home." Max gave a low, steady growl, a promise of loyalty and strength. The hours stretched into the night, but Jake barely felt tired. Every sound outside made him tense. An owl's hoot, the rustle of leaves, a distant car engine. His farm was alive, with danger, and he was ready. The next day, Jake's neighbor Sarah stopped by, her face grave. "You need to be careful, Jake," she warned. "Karen's got people. I don't think she's working alone." Jake nodded slowly. "I've seen signs. Footprints that don't match hers. Strange noises at night. I'm setting up more security." Sarah lowered her voice. "There's talk in the HOA about a bigger plan. Something about land development. Karen's trying to clear out anyone who might slow it down. You're caught in the middle." Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This wasn't just a petty HOA dispute anymore. It was a fight for his land. His freedom. That evening, Jake sat on the porch, Max lying at his feet. He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer friend Mark again. "Mark, I'm gearing up for a battle here. Karen's not just bluffing. I need to know what legal weapons I have. But more than that, I need to be ready if things get physical." Mark's voice was steady. "Document everything, Jake. Keep the cameras rolling. If Karen or anyone else crosses onto your land, you have the right to defend yourself and your properties. Just stay calm and don't escalate unless you have to." Jake looked at Max and smiled faintly. "Good boy, we've got a job to do." As darkness fell, Jake heard the faint crunch of footsteps. Outside the fence, Max's ears pricked up instantly, the growl deepening in his throat. Jake grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside, the beam cutting through the night. "Show yourself," Jake called, voice firm. The shadows shifted, but no one answered. Jake's heart pounded. The calm farm life he had known was gone. The lines between friend and foe were blurring, and the showdown with Karen and whoever else was involved was just beginning. The nights had grown colder, the chill slipping through the cracks of Jake's old farmhouse as the battle lines drew tighter around his sanctuary. Jake and Max had fallen into a tense routine. By day, Jake fortified the fences, monitored cameras, and kept watchful eyes on the horizon. By night, Max patrolled the grounds like a fierce guardian, his deep growls echoing through the still air. But the tension wasn't just in the air. It had begun to manifest in things Jake couldn't explain. One evening, while reviewing his security footage after dinner, Jake noticed something odd. A shadow moving silently just beyond the reach of the infrared cameras, gliding like a ghost between the trees near the windmill. The figure never made a direct appearance, always just out of frame, slipping through the shadows. Jake's pulse quickened. Someone was sneaking around his farm again, but this time, it wasn't Karen. The trespasser moved with practiced stealth, leaving barely a trace. The next night, Jake stayed up, flashlight in hand, heart hammering in the dark. Max sat beside him, alert and growling low in his throat. The wind whispered secrets through the cornfields. Suddenly the dog stiffened, ears pricked toward the back fence. Jake followed Max's gaze and spotted a faint silhouette, a figure crouched near the gate, fiddling with the lock. Jake's voice was low and steady. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" The figure froze for a heartbeat, then bolted into the darkness. Jake raced after, heart pounding like a drum, but the figure disappeared like smoke into the night. The next morning, Jake found the gate lock tampered with, scratches deep and deliberate. Whoever was trying to get in knew exactly what they were doing. Shaken, Jake called Sarah again. "Someone's been tampering with my locks overnight. This isn't just about Karen anymore. There's someone else. Someone stealthy and dangerous." Frowned. "This is bad, Jake. If Karen's got backup, you're in real trouble. You need to prepare for a fight, and not just a legal one." Jake agreed. He started looking for more signs of intrusion. Tracks in the dirt, missing tools, anything that could give him a clue. But the mysterious intruder was always one step ahead. One afternoon, while working near the barn, Jake found a small envelope tucked beneath a loose board. Inside was a single photograph, taken from afar, of Jake and Max sitting on the porch. The handwriting on the back chilled him. "We're watching." Jake's blood ran cold. This wasn't just intimidation. It was a warning. Max growled, sensing the shift in Jake's mood. Determined not to back down, Jake doubled down on security. He set up motion-activated floodlights, installed extra cameras with night vision, and even rigged an old bell on the gate that would ring if disturbed. But Jake knew it was more than physical defenses that he needed. He had to understand who was behind this and why. Late that night, after Max was settled in the kitchen, Jake sat down at his computer, cross-referencing neighborhood reports, digging through HOA meeting minutes, and scouring public records. He uncovered a web of connections. Karen's relentless push wasn't just about the windmill. There were bigger plans for the land surrounding his farm. Luxury homes, commercial developments, and exclusive gated communities. Karen was a pawn, and maybe something more, in a scheme to clear out dissenters. Jake's fists clenched. This was no ordinary neighbor dispute. It was a calculated attempt to seize control, to force him out by fear and harassment. He wasn't alone, though. Sarah had offered her support, and Mark, his lawyer, was preparing for a fight, but the stakes had just been raised. And Jake knew it wouldn't be long before Karen and her shadowy allies made their next move. The tension around the farm had become a constant shadow, wrapping itself around Jake's every thought. Despite the cameras, alarms, and the protective presence of Max, the unknown threat still lurked in the darkness. Jake barely slept, each creak and rustle sending his heart racing. That night, the wind picked up, carrying a chill that seemed unnatural for early fall. Jake sat on the porch, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hand, eyes scanning the edge of the property where the shadows lengthened. Max lay nearby, ears twitching, muscles coiled like a spring. Suddenly, the dog's low growl cut through the silence, sharp and urgent. Jake's head snapped up. From the corner of the yard, a figure emerged, moving cautiously, but with purpose. "Who's there?" Jake called, his voice steady but firm. The figure froze, then stepped forward into the dim porch light. A young woman, dirt smudged on her face, eyes wide but defiant. Jake's mind raced. He didn't recognize her. "I need help," she said, quickly, voice trembling. "I'm not here to cause trouble." Jake glanced at Max, whose growl softened, but didn't vanish. "Who are you? What are you doing on my land?" Jake asked, rising from his chair. The woman swallowed hard. "My name's Emily. I used to live in the HOA neighborhood. Karen's been scaring people, pushing them out, doing things no one talks about. I escaped because I was afraid for my life." Jake frowned. "What kind of things?" Emily glanced over her shoulder nervously. "Threats, harassment, and worse. Karen has people watching, making sure no one fights back. I couldn't take it anymore. I came here because I heard you were standing up to her." Jake's gut twisted. This was bigger than he thought. More dangerous. "Why come to me?" Jake asked. "If Karen's got a network, why risk it?" Emily took a deep breath. "Because you're different. You're not just some homeowner who'll give in. And because I have something, proof of what Karen and her allies are planning. But I can't stay. If they find me here, I'm done for." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Show me." She pulled a crumpled envelope from her jacket and handed it over. Inside were photos, documents, even recordings, evidence of illegal meetings, bribes and plans to forcibly remove residents like Jake to make way for a massive development project. Jake's blood ran cold. This was more than just a fight over a windmill. It was corruption, greed, and a conspiracy to seize control by any means necessary. Suddenly, the farmhouse door slammed shut behind them. Max growled fiercely, racing toward the sound. Jake and Emily exchanged a look of alarm. Someone was inside the house. Jake grabbed a flashlight and moved cautiously through the dim hallway. His heart pounded as shadows shifted and the faint sound of footsteps echoed. "Stay close," Jake whispered. They edged toward the kitchen when a figure appeared in the doorway. Karen, smirking, flanked by two men Jake didn't recognize. Well, Karen sneered. "Looks like we caught ourselves some visitors." Emily's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. Jake stepped forward, blocking her path. "Get out of my house, Karen." Karen laughed coldly. "Or what? You'll call your guard dog to scare us off?" Max growled, baring his teeth. Karen's eyes flicked to Max, then back to Jake. "This is just the beginning. You'll regret crossing me." Without warning, the men lunged forward. Jake reacted instantly, pushing Emily behind him. Max sprang into action, a thunderous force, tearing into one of the intruders with savage precision. The struggle was chaotic. Shouts, crashing furniture, growls and snarls filling the cramped space. Jake grabbed a heavy lamp, swinging it at the second man, as Max pinned the first to the floor, teeth clenched. Karen retreated, eyes blazing with fury. "This isn't over." She slipped out the back door, disappearing into the night, breathless and shaken. Jake helped Emily steady herself. "We have to be ready," Jake said grimly. "They're not just going to stop." Max barked once, standing tall, fierce, and loyal. The farm was no longer just Jake's refuge. It was the front line in a war he couldn't afford to lose. The farmhouse was eerily quiet after the night's chaos. Jake sat heavily at the kitchen table, still catching his breath. the dim glow of the overhead light casting long shadows on the walls. Max rested nearby, muscles still tense, eyes locked, on the darkened door. Emily sat across from him, clutching a worn envelope tightly. The evidence she brought was a lifeline, but it also painted a terrifying picture. "We need a plan," Jake said, voice low but steady. "Karen won't stop. If she's got this whole network backing her, we need allies." Emily nodded. "There's someone you should meet. Someone who doesn't want Karen's plans to succeed either." Jake leaned forward. "Who?" "Her name is Clara. She used to be on the HOA board, but left when she saw how dirty things were getting. She's been quietly gathering proof, helping people leave before Karen could get to them. She's been trying to build a resistance." Jake rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Sounds like we need her." Emily looked around nervously. "I can take you to her, but it's risky. Karen's people watch everyone." Jake's gaze hardened. "Risk is something I'm getting used to." They agreed to meet Clara at a secluded spot on the edge of the neighboring town, a rundown coffee shop with chipped paint and flickering neon signs. A place unlikely to draw attention. The following evening, Jake drove cautiously, Max lying beside him in the passenger seat. The streets outside the HOA neighborhood looked normal enough, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At the coffee shop, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a wary smile awaited them. "Jake," she said, extending a hand. "I've heard a lot about you." Jake shook her hand firmly. "Likewise. What do you have for us?" Clara slid a folder across the table. More proof, emails, financial records, everything linking Karen to illegal land deals and coercion. Jake flipped through the documents, the enormity of the conspiracy hitting him harder than ever. "But there's more," Clara continued. "Karen isn't just an aggressive neighbor. She's backed by a powerful developer who wants your land. They're planning a big move next week, probably an attempt to seize your fam by force or legal loophole." Jake's fists clenched. "We need to stop them before it's too late." Clara nodded. "That's why we're building a coalition. Others like you, who refuse to give in." Jake felt a surge of hope, but also the weight of the fight ahead. "I'm in." Back on the farm, Jake fortified his defenses. The new alliance meant strength, but also more eyes on him. Danger multiplied. That night, as Jake reviewed the security feeds, a sudden movement caught his eye. Near the southern fence, a figure slipped quietly, moving with practiced stealth. Jake's heart pounded as he grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside, Max at his side. "Stop right there!" Jake shouted. The figure froze, then slowly turned. A young man, nervous but defiant. "I'm not here to hurt you," the man said, voice low. "My name's Lucas. I'm part of the resistance. We're watching Karen's people too. We can help." Jake lowered the flashlight slightly, eyes searching Lucas's face. Could he trust this stranger? Max growled, but didn't advance. Jake took a deep breath. "All right, Lucas, let's talk." As the night stretched on, a fragile new alliance was forged, one that could tip the balance in Jake's favor. But Karen's shadow loomed large, and the fight for the farm was far from over. The sun was sinking low behind the rolling hills as Jake, Max, Emily, Clara, and Lucas gathered near the edge of the farm. Tonight was the night. The day Karen's shadow had threatened so long was about to break, one way or another. Jake's hands tightened around a heavy flashlight, his mind racing. The coalition was ready. They had the evidence, the allies, and the will to fight. But Karen's network was dangerous. More than just neighbors. They were armed, desperate, and ruthless. Max growled low, his broad shoulders tense Sensing the storm coming, suddenly, a series of bright lights burst to life across the fence line. Spotlights swept the fields, cutting through the gathering dusk, like searchlights on a battlefield. "Looks like they're making their move," Jake whispered. Through the glare, figures appeared. Several men and women moving with purpose, carrying tools, weapons, and devices meant to intimidate and control. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as Karen stepped forward. Her face twisted in a triumphant sneer. "This ends tonight, Jake," she hissed. "You'll regret ever standing in our way." Jake stepped forward, voice steady. "This farm belongs to me, and with the truth on my side, you don't stand a chance." The two sides faced off, tension snapping like a wire stretched too tight. Suddenly, Max charged, a thunderous force crashing into the front line. The attackers scattered, surprised by the dog's ferocity. In the chaos, Jake and the others moved swiftly, locking gates, activating alarms, and broadcasting the scene live to local news and authorities via their phones. The arrival of flashing, red and blue lights in the distance sent Karen's group into disarray. Desperation took over. Karen's smug expression faltered, then twisted into rage. "You think this changes anything?" she spat. "The developer will be here soon. You can't stop what's coming." But just as she finished, headlights cut through the dusk. Marked vehicles with official seals rolling onto the farm. Police officers and city officials swarmed in, armed with warrants and authority. Jake felt a surge of relief and triumph. Minutes later, Karen and her henchmen were handcuffed and led away, their plans unraveled by the coalition's evidence and the swift arrival of law enforcement. As the dust settled, Jake stood on the porch, Max by his side, watching the sunrise paint the sky with streaks of gold and pink. Emily approached quietly, handing him a small envelope. "More proof for the records," she said softly. "To keep this fam safe." Jake smiled, the weight of the battle lifting from his shoulders. But just as he turned to head inside, Max growled low, eyes fixed on the horizon. In the distance, a figure watched from the tree line, a knowing smile playing on their lips. Karen's network might have been broken, but the war for the land was far from over. Jake's farm was safe for now, but the shadows would always be waiting, and so the fight for home and justice continued.